Vi har en punkt till innan vi får en liten paus med ännu mer kaffe. Och det är Kim Ross som jag välkomnar upp på scen. Du är ursprungligen från, nu ska jag säga, Aberdeen, Skottland. Och jag vet, ja, du gillar whisky. Det behöver vi inte ens säga, kanske. Du har ju jobbat du har över 20 års erfarenhet från hållbar affärs- och destinationsutveckling inom besöksnäringen. Och du har ju utvecklat kvalitetssystem både i Skottland, Norge och Sverige. Och sen har du också jobbat med över 3000 företag. Så nu kommer vi få ta del av lite av de berättelserna som du har sugit åt dig. Så du kommer dela med dig.
Ja.
Ja, vad bra. It's all yours.
Tack så jättemycket. Hej allihopa och tack för att ni lyssnar på skotska. I am in a really dangerous position right now because I am the bit between you and fika. So don't worry, we will get there. I'm going to share a few stories around your stories, actually, around sustainable tourism in Sweden and that green thread that runs through nature tourism. But first, I wanted to set the scene by pressing my button. There we go. And make it a global perspective and then drill down to a lot of the things that we do on the ground. Globally right now, in my home country, in Glasgow, we have COP26, who have the two massive goals of big reductions. So you'll hear a lot about that. Unless, of course, it's all blah, blah, blah. But if we drill down to the tourism part of that, and that's the tourism declaration, the Glasgow Declaration, which you can all be part of. But that's the bit that really impacts on us. I'm talking more about measurables and monitoring sustainability later. But that's my focus there. How are you connecting with this that's going on? Another thing that you can get involved in, if you wish, is Tourism Declares. And that's a much more accessible network, I think, global network, where there are 300 people involved now, or 300 organizations. And they can, I must find out where I need to point for this, there. So people like you can get involved, and I think that's quite a nice place to be with your global network. So have a think about that one. But this is one where you're definitely involved, the new Swedish tourism strategy. It has two focuses. They're based on sustainability and innovation. And the one bit that I liked that I saw was that it connects with the visitor and it enables the visitor to make sustainable choices. But that is all down to how you will be working. How does Sweden look in a global context? Well, there you are, still at number 1 this year. Well done. But that's down to the work that we do and the planning that we do and the foresight that we have with sustainable tourism. What does the consumer think? And how is the consumer wanting to experience experiences now? Well, luckily for us in the nature tourism segment, we have nature tourism as the third choice, if you like, of some experiences that the global consumer will have. But if we drill it down to Sweden, Visit Sweden are telling us that nature is the third choice here too. So we're really in a good place at the right time with the right focus and the big energy that's now going on around sustainable tourism and nature tourism. Visit Sweden are pulling these themes through their campaigns. So I ask you, how can you lift your tourism business based on some of the marketing that they're doing? Nature, eco-lodges, workcation. How can you add these themes to the tourism product or nature and culture product that you're working with? So when I look at this statement, that's what I really feel about the work that we're doing. The next big thing is all of the work that you're doing. It all counts. Now I want to drill down to local and think of things locally. How can you work with that? In Scotland, there's a project right now that's gathering all the local stories from the west coast of Scotland. And they're allowing anyone to input information. They're focusing on the three things: people, place, and happenings. How does that connect to you and your business? Well, I challenge you to think about who you could include in your storytelling. I took a journey recently in Östergötland where I do my destination development work. And in 1 week, I met all these people. I stayed in a lighthouse cottage. I met Lasse, and he told me about his dad who worked in the lighthouse. I was on the island of Aspoja, and I met Helene, who has a farm and a summer restaurant. She works with local produce, obviously producing her own meat, using other produce from the island, and delivers fantastic local food. I met Irene when I stayed in one of her cottages, and she took me for a walk along the coast and explained all about the rock and the geology and the environment that I hadn't thought about before, and of course the rising islands. This is Christian. He has his kayaking company and he's a guide, and he also told me so much about the Baltic and the challenges that we have there. So not all happy stories, challenges and how we're working with that in the environment. This is Uno and his smoked fish, and even if the sign says stengt, if you stay in the car park, he will open up. Nice one. And lastly, Magnus, who drives or pilots his boat to Harstena, and he is the 15th generation of his family living there. All of these stories, all of these people really enriched my experience, and when I go home and I reflect in a year or two's time, sometimes these are the things that stay. So from your perspective, who can you work with in your region? Because that's the big thing that I would remember, is a lot of these small things. Now we're going to get serious about measuring and monitoring, because if you're working with sustainability, you cannot measure what you do not monitor. And that's about reduction. We're looking to reduce our experience, our impact, if you like, on our tourism experience. And if you have data, then it's still just data. So how do we in nature tourism use that data? You see these poles down here, that they're tracking in real time using Internet of Things, the movement of people within a certain environment. And I'm telling you a little bit about a project later on of how that's been used. But that's a way of us starting to manage the movement of people in our environment. And this is where you're looking at destination development. But some of this information can also be used for product development. So that's the tracking on site of people's movements and footfall. The other way that we can use information is from mobile phones. And we can use Telia data to show how one mobile phone moved from one part to the other part of your destination. I'm going to share a story of Lake Tokern, where I'm working in Östergötland. It's one of the most important, I'm told, bird lakes in Northern Europe. So it's very relevant, very interesting, and it has visitors all year round. So what we did was we put a pole that measured the footfall going into Tokern. There's also a Naturum, so that was a good way of managing and analysing the visitors beyond the people who just visit the visitor centre. So the result of that you can see here. There's where we were, right on the edge of Lake Vättern on the east coast. And we had a graph here that can tell us the rhythm of life, the number of visitors that come from Monday to Sunday. And you can see here, throughout the year, Saturday, Sunday, obviously, around 50 on average and 100 on a Sunday. What does that tell us, or what does that tell you? If you're looking to deliver a tourism experience there, if you want the place to yourself, when would you go? When would you take your group? Or if you want to develop a new product, when do you think you might want to launch some tours? Or how might you want to promote the tours? Or when or where might you want to promote them? So that's a good way of planning, and then you're sure there's going to be someone to work with. The last thing we analysed, if you look at this side, is that from August to now, there's still people coming. All year round, there's a rhythm of visitors who come. So if you see that as an opportunity, as a nature tourism business, how can you use this data to deliver something new? So that's down to people and footfall. If we think of Telia data, that's the moving of the mobile phone. This example, at the right-hand side, are the purple boxes. Don't look at the numbers, it's just a coding, but we're managing the number of people who were outside the purple box, who went into the purple box. And that's the East Coast, Skärgård and Östergötland. And what this tells us is you have the curve, you see the top left graph, you have the usual crazy July curve, but what we also have are weekends, even from January to March, where people are moving into the area. There's obviously potential to grow the months either side of July, but the data tells us people are there when there is absolutely nothing but the nature to do. So maybe there's an opportunity for restaurants, nature tours, boat trips to expand what they do. We have the data to show people are there. It just needs someone to make the move. We have a new visitor. Not really, but we're told that they're looking for transformative experiences. Are you all up for that? Delivering transformative experiences. How can that be? And how can we engage in that way that's going to meet the expectations of the visitor? Well, we're told that the best way, actually, in terms of sharing information about our challenges with the climate and respect of nature tourism is through these experiences and communicating, and that's down to the storytelling that you choose to share. Blogging is convinced that Sweden is offering slow tourism now. How can you work with that? This is my favorite slow nature tourism experience, nature experience, and it's been picked up by the British press, so that's quite interesting. But what about rewilding? Do you have a story around that? What's your narrative about how you are working or know of rewilding projects here in Sweden or near where you work? I thought this was fun. This is the Hostel Association, STF, and how they've done a bit of a twist on conferences and connected them to nature. Sweden by Bike. I've used this as an example because I think they're really good at finding an infrastructure that already exists in Sweden with really good signposting and really good networking, and they're building their products on it. So if you look at the range in their portfolio, you have experiences up in Sápmi in the north, you have winter cycling, you take a lake and you take 4 days to go around it, or you introduce elements of glamping. So really good examples of collaborative work. So how could you, with your nature product, work with that? Electric bikes. This is Switzerland. They already have an infrastructure that takes people across the country or across a mountain along a route where they can recharge, refuel, and stay over. How can we develop that in Sweden, but maybe add a dash of nature tourism with that? The same with electric cars. I heard the other day that in the Arctic, people who are coming for Arctic tourism now feel pretty guilty about coming for Arctic tourism, so when they hire cars now, they only want electric cars. I also have an electric car, and it's the most boring 2 or 3 hours of my life to wait in a horrible petrol station till it charges up. So how can we change that? How can we work with these stations to develop, perhaps, if you like, a nature hopping tour for your car around Sweden? Festivals are another way of extending seasonal experiences, but also if you just think of this in the context of the theme that we're talking about. Blekinge just now, last weekend, did Älskahöst and will do the same, Älska vår. That's coming up. But how can we work with festivals or experiences that incorporate bushcraft? We have agriculture tourism or food tourism through agriculture and farm visits. Food provenance, local food, working also with wild food, big trees, seaweeds, nature, geology. I never hear very much in my travels about the geology of Sweden, and that's really interesting, and dark skies. So these are festivals, but they can also be topics that can be added into your themes that you're going to work with. And how do you work with families and children? I was at a puppet theatre up in Norrbotten where they did a lovely story. It was for children, but I absolutely enjoyed it, where they talked about climate change through the eyes of the reindeer and the white hare. How could you incorporate stories for, well, a mixed audience, really, when you're encouraging the family market to come? This is actually what happened in Scotland, and for the last 15 to 20 years, they really focused on working with nature tourism because it's that extended our season and contributes a lot to making it a year-round destination. So think about things that you can do with children, introducing digitization, listening to bird calls, booklets that they can work through, interacting with the landscape, feeling the nature, feeling the story, as well as it being a good level for their parents. I just thought I'd share this because it's fun. We don't have to be so serious about everything we talk about with nature. We can add a bit of humour. This is the Armory Museum, the Livrustkammaren Museum in Stockholm. And this is how they're working.
Wow, you can really dance.
With a bit of fun.
Wow, you can really dance. He went. They said we've both been dancing all this time. What a coincidence.
So, how do we communicate sustainable commitment? Well, I'm sure it's all top of mind for all of you, but how do you do it? And how do you reach me, the guest? How do you reach any travel agencies? How do you just talk the talk and share that with your heart? Well, it can often involve a few figures as well. And I share in this example of Ödevata, who I worked with in Småland. They are a farm, ställplats, camping, fisk, stugor, the whole shebang, really. But they have an extra special thing where they work with biochar. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. They make that and they use that as a nutritional supplement for soil. It's very interesting because what they do with it is what you see on the other side. And that's, they work with aquaponics. So they have an exchange, if you like, using the biochar between the fish and the plants. And the output of that is tomatoes, bananas, and sometimes passion fruit. So a really interesting place. But what's more interesting too about what they do is that they document it, they measure it, and they monitor it. And they want to reduce their impact. And they share what you see here. That's on their website, so if you're interested, have a look. And they go through all aspects of their whole business, the whole destination, their whole collaborations with the neighbours and so on, and then all the practical stuff that we do measure, you know, like waste and water and so on. So they have a really good structure. They have a goal, they have an action, they have a time, and then they have a person responsible. How are you working with that, and how are you communicating what you do, and how do you measure, and how do you monitor? So the last thing I'm going to talk about today before your fika, I haven't forgotten, is the elephant in the room. Can anyone guess what my elephant is? Did anybody whisper? Nobody's guessing my elephant. Guys. Usually at this point somebody says fleeg scam, which would have been a good guess. No, this is my elephant. I'm going to talk about the guest experience and how it connects and how we can talk more about how to do this, going to the toilet in the wilderness. Okay? And I'm going to take it from the guest journey, the whole guest experience, and the 5 stages of the guest journey. So the first thing that your guest will do, any guest, and I'm not just saying international people, mostly international people, but some Swedish, as you would know about what's happened at Kebnekaise and Kungsleden over the past 2 years. So my story is, on your website, when you start to talk about your experiences, the first thing you must do is show how you're working with sustainability. So the guest, so I can appreciate your commitment and your storytelling. So show me your accreditations, the example I just gave there, how you have an aspiration or a goal or your memberships, all your storytelling, however you wish, but do share that story. Once I've looked at the websites and I've been inspired that I'm coming maybe coming to your experience, I'm going to drill down deeper in your website. So in that website, have a section of frequently asked questions, which will include, if you do day trips or overnight trips in the wilderness, how I should be going to the toilet, whether it's this type of toilet or any other out in nature. Just mention it so that there's a clear standard and set of expectations that's been made right at the very start. I mean, it could be that it's the first time I've been out in the wilderness. That's the thing to keep in mind. So now I've drilled down, I've read your website, I'm feeling really inspired about your product, and I'm now going to book. So I have made that booking. By doing that booking, you now have the opportunity to communicate personally with me. In that booking confirmation, you can tell me what you provide. Then you can tell me what I need to bring for my own experience. So I'm really set on expectations. And then you can also add whatever I might need to make this more comfortable for me. That's really the key thing in setting the detail and the expectations at that point. now I'm here, and I'm with you. And I've visited hundreds of outdoor activity providers in my time and worked with them. And I've never once had the real story about this. Because what happens is somebody gives you this, and then they give you a mysterious bag with things in it. They don't tell you what's in it. And they just hope that you're going to know what to do with it. So get rid of all the awkwardness, take the bull by the horns, and just explain to me, but do it in a learning context. Do it in a way that I can understand more about the environment I'm in. Why have you chosen for us to camp here? Why have you told me that I need to do this 70 paces away from the camp or 70 paces away from a waterway? Talk to me about Allemansrätten. Talk to me about the impact on nature. Talk to me about the nature reserve. Talk to me about the respect of nature. Give me the information that I really understand the storytelling around this experience. Not this experience, but the whole reason about it, and make it a holistic understanding. That will educate me, give me the respect, give me the understanding, and you can add storytelling around geology, soil, wildlife, flora, and fauna too. So make it a bigger lesson. If you did all of that, you've just set my expectations all the way along my guest experience. And I'll have felt confident, comfortable, secure, knowledgeable, and I'll have built a respect for the nature that I'm now spending time in. And that really is worth it. And that all comes from this. I hope I've shared some stories. What you will understand is what I've just spoken about can drill back up and into the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that we all work with. But the one thing that's for sure is that the next big thing is what you all have your hearts working with.